Over the last year, my team and I have built automations for dozens of businesses. But in the last few months, most new clients we've taken on moved off of n8n as the core of their setup. And it's not that n8n stopped working. It's that AI agents can now handle way more than n8n ever could. So if you're thinking of automating certain parts of your business, or you're already using tools like n8n or make.com, I want to explain how AI agents changed absolutely everything. How we're using them in our clients' businesses to automate processes that wouldn't be possible before, and how you can do the same. Let's get into it. All right, so let's start off where n8n still works. For this to make sense, we need to understand what n8n actually is at its core. So pretty much n8n is basically a visual wrapper on top of code. Because all automation comes down to connecting endpoints together with API keys. And n8n gives you a nice visual way to build that and see what's happening. The platform itself isn't doing anything magical. It's just a cleaner interface for work that used to require a developer writing it from scratch. Now, for specific types of work, n8n is genuinely the right tool. The way I think about it is this. n8n is like a vending machine. You build a program that follows a fixed path, and that same path runs every single time. So a form gets filled out, an email gets sent, a Slack notification fires, because the steps never change. You could trust it to run correctly on repeat without anyone watching it. But the problem is that this only works as long as nothing unexpected shows up. The second something falls outside the fixed path you've built, the workflow stops and waits for a human to come in and fix it. So if a lead fills out your form in a slightly different way, or an API response comes back in the format you didn't plan for, you have to go debug a workflow that was supposed to save you time. And the more workflows you run in n8n, the more often this happens. A workflow that breaks once a month isn't a big deal, but when you've got 10 or 20 of them running across your business, someone on your team is fixing them every week. So one that comes to mind is that I had an email marketing for e-commerce client that we were building an automation for. The whole idea is that we'd build out their email flows using AI to generate the copy, and the AI would reference their internal files to get the brand voice, product details, past campaigns, all of it. The initial build worked great. Clean flow, good outputs, the client was happy. Then we started actually onboarding the real files. Turns out their team had stuff scattered across every format you could imagine. Google Sheets, XLSX files, Docs, Google Docs, PDFs, and the problem was that Claude's vision capabilities only natively support PDFs and PNGs. So the second somebody dropped an Excel or a Docs into the workflow, the whole thing would break. No copy generated, flow dies, and we find out after the fact. What made it tricky was that we couldn't just tell the client only upload PDFs. That defeats the whole point of the automation. They needed to be able to drop in whatever they had. So I had to go back and add a file type detection setup at the front of the workflow, then route each format through its own conversion path before it hit the AI step. Sheets and Excels had to be parsed and converted. Docs and Google Docs had to be pulled into a format Claude could actually read. And only then could the rest of the flow run. Honestly, I probably spent somewhere around 10 hours over 3 days just on one piece, building the conversion logic. Testing each format, and catching the weird edge cases. The lesson for me is that AI is rarely what breaks in these types of builds. It's everything around AI. The inputs, the file handling, and the formatting that you have to catch the edge cases and over-engineer for. Now let's talk about AI agents. Now, the thing we're using more and more with clients is AI agents. An AI agent works in a completely different way than an automation. The simplest way of putting it is if n8n is a vending machine, an AI agent is just an employee. You give it a goal and it figures out the steps it needs to take to get there. And if something unexpected shows up along the way, it adapts instead of stopping and waiting for a human. The reason an agent can do this is because it has both an orchestration and execution built into it. Orchestration means the agent can look at a situation and decide what's the correct next step, the same way a person would. Execution means it can then go and actually do that step, whether it's sending an email, pulling data from a system, or triggering another tool. And that combination is what separates an agent from a regular automation and from a regular chatbot. To make this concrete, think about the difference between a simple lead capture process and a full marketing function. For something like lead capture, where a form gets filled, the lead gets added to your CRM and a Slack notification fires. An agent would be unnecessary. But for something like running outbound, where you need to understand your positioning, write copy, decide who to send it to, review what came back and iterate, that's where an agent actually makes sense because every one of those steps requires a decision. Now, one thing to be careful of is that the same flexibility that makes AI agents so powerful is also what can make things go wrong. Because if an agent is making decisions on its own and you don't architect it with the right guardrails, you won't get the same output every single time. An automation in n8n is going to run the same path on every trigger, which is a huge advantage for anything repeatable. So the rule I give clients is that if the process is simple and it happens the same way every single time, build it as an automation. If the process needs judgment or adapts based off context, build it as an agent. This is exactly why we don't just remove every n8n workflow and replace it with an agent. For a lot of core business processes, something fixed and repeatable is exactly what you want, because the return on investment for building an agent for it isn't there yet. It's only when you hit a workflow where an edge case keeps making it break, or where the process is complex enough to need real decisions, that an agent becomes the right call. By the way, if you want to know exactly which parts of your business should be automated, as well as if it should be built in n8n or as an AI agent, I do free automation audits where I dive deep into your business and give you exactly that information. If you're interested, you'll find a link for that in the description below. Now let's keep going. Now let's talk about agents and n8n. Now the way people talk about this online makes it sound like you have to pick a side. Either you're an agent person or you're an n8n person, and that's what you should use for everything. But that's not how we've ever built it for clients. Almost every client we work with ends up with both running side by side because they're solving two different problems. The repeatable high volume stuff gets built in n8n, lead comes in, gets enriched, gets routed, Slack notification fires, CRM gets updated. That's the same path every single time, and you want it to run the exact same way every single time. But the parts of the business that need judgment, like writing outbound copy, qualifying leads based on context, deciding which proposal fits with a prospect, those get built as agents. So the real shift isn't that AI agents replaced n8n, it's that we now have a clean way to make the two work together. And that's what MCP unlocked. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's an open standard from Anthropic that lets AI agents plug into external tools the same way a USB lets any device plug into a computer. n8n has MCP built in on both sides, meaning an n8n workflow can call out to an agent when it hits a step that needs judgment, and an agent can trigger an n8n workflow when it needs something deterministic to run. Now the agent and automation actually speak the same language, so you can hand work back and forth between them without it falling apart. Now for you as a business owner, this changes the question you should be asking. It's not, should I use agents or automations? It's, where in my business does each one belong? Because the businesses that are pulling away right now are not the ones that picked a side. They're the ones running both, with the right tool doing the job. So if you're a business owner and you're thinking about all of the workflows your team is still running manually, or all the automations that keep breaking and pulling your team away from the actual work, make sure to click the first link in the description to book a free automation audit with me. I'll go through your entire operation with you and show you exactly where an agent plus n8n setup could be replacing work you or your team is still doing by hand. Again, you can book that free audit using the first link below. And if you want to see how Claude Code can run your entire business for you, then check out this video next.